Oh, I'm taxed for saying multinational. Hi everyone, welcome to Unfiltered, a podcast by the Green EFA Group in the European Parliament, where we sit down with politicians from our group to discuss issues that matter for all Europeans. For more unfiltered conversations, you can subscribe at greens.eu/podcast. My name is Simon McKegney, and today I'm joined by two Green members of the European Parliament, Marie Toussaint from France and Rasmus Andersen from Germany. You're both very welcome. We're here to talk about wealth, why it is that so many people in Europe are struggling to pay their bills. Governments across Europe are cash-strapped and restricted from investing in infrastructure for everyone, while at the same time the ultra-rich get away without paying much tax at all. We'll be asking our guests why they began working on tax and wealth distribution issues, why it matters to them, and why it matters for Europe. So, Marie and Rasmus, you're both very welcome. Before we start, we have a bit of a twist for the podcast. We know that tax policy can get a bit dry sometimes, and we're trying to keep it as accessible to as many people out there as possible. So we are imposing a little policy jargon tax. So you'll hear the following noise, if we can. If you hear that noise, you will be taxed. You have some money in front of you. You have to put it in this unicorn piggy bank. So that's our way of keeping us all on track to avoid us being too bureaucratic with our language. But let's get into it. Firstly, personal questions. How and why is this issue important to you, the issue of taxing billionaires and tax in general and wealth inequality in Europe?
Let's begin with Rasmus.
Well, I mean, I think that like the level of inequality that like some very few very rich people have a lot and the majority of society has less is a very important topic for democracy, because I think that like in general, if we can see inequality developing like it did in the past years, our democracy actually is threatened, because like people are getting frustrated about like that politics is not delivering for the many but just for the few. And that's why I think this is a topic which is important, not just to me personally, but also to like politics in general and for the EU, because my feeling is that if we won't solve this kind of inequality, then we will not solve all of the other issues we are dealing with here in the Parliament and outside in society.
Marie, was there a moment for you that a light bulb that said you need to work on these issues?
Inequalities.
Yeah,
well, I have to say it's a bit by birth. My parents were working against poverty and exclusion. So I somehow was born with this idea. And really the issue is not about annoying people that have too much money. It's not about that. It's just about saying, okay, we have so many people, I mean, Rasmus said it, but that live being deprived, and it's not because they deserve it. I mean, they're hardworking, they're smart people, they manage to do a lot with very few, which is the greatest kind of smartness that you can find in humanity, but they don't manage to make it. So how do we solve this issue? That's the first question. And then behind, there is a question of civilization, I believe. How come we accept so many differences and so much injustices? And that's really a question. And I think the EU is strong also because up to now, and we now need to hack because it can go away, but until now we have managed to keep inequalities into a certain level over the last decades. And I think this is really what makes also the value of the EU, to have, people that can live together, that still live in the same world. And this is not so much the case already today. Some people can travel, others just don't. So we need to keep people together as well.
You've both been in the European Parliament now for at least 2 mandates, I think, so this is your second. We have seen some progress. The Greens have led on some progress when it comes to global multinational tax. I'm taxed for saying multinational. Do you think we're doing enough at EU level, and does the EU have the tools to fight wealth inequality and related issues?
You know, in the context of the interinstitutional trialogue on the macro-fiscal governance framework.
That was clear. I think you have to put all of your money, your cash in right now.
But I've not finished the 2-pack and 6-pack rules.
Yeah, you still have to save some, I think.
I will save some. No, but the EU could act a lot more, actually. But yeah, indeed, and I think Rasmus will come back a bit more on our successes because he was one of the ones working for it in the last mandate. But we've managed some stuff, like we've managed to ensure that the banks have some rules also, not to throw money by the window and you know, not make a lot of money out of crisis that impact a lot of lives. We've managed to get also a minimum wage directive that is now a bit put into question, but we're going to keep on fighting for it. And we've put some issues on the table, like the minimum income, even though we still have to fight for it to happen. But the EU really is a global player that could really make a change, especially when it comes to taxing the wealthiest people. The EU is one of the biggest markets in the world. We have normally a strong diplomacy, a strong role to play in history. So if we can have a role of bringing the entire world together to ensure that the richest that move their money, depending on countries, well, they actually contribute to solving some of the humanity challenges like poverty or, of course, climate change.
I don't think the EU is doing enough. Just to answer your question more directly, I fully agree that we could see some developments in the past, also because of the work we as Greens did here in the Parliament, but also at member states level, like for example taxing the profits of some of the big corporations we could see during the pandemic and afterwards with the ongoing war in Ukraine, where we could see that some big corporations, energy companies got a lot of profits, and where we at least could tax part of this so that we are getting a bit out of the revenue so that we can finance with the revenues other projects. But on the other side, I also see some backlashes now, and Marie already mentioned some of them in a global environment with a US president not interested in taxing the rich or multinational corporations, but to protect them. I don't actually know why I should pay for that, because I think that was quite easy to understand that Trump not really is leading the way when it comes to taxing big corporations and profits of big corporations, neither of the rich. And there I really think we have to speed up, and we need to see more action at the European level. And I think that especially looking into what the EU Commission is doing or isn't doing, like Ursula von der Leyen, then I really think we have a challenge there, both when it comes to proposals on taxation, but also when it comes to social measures, how to spend more money also on social projects, or either to establish more transparency, because I think that one of the basic problems is that we don't know who is owning what and how much wealth do different super rich have in the world. So there is also a transparency angle to this, and there I think the EU needs to deliver, and we had called for this for a long time. But as it stands now, it's still an uphill battle, and we still have a lot of work to do in the next years.
I rebound on what Rasmus is saying, because we're working a lot on housing also together. One of the issues of housing is that less and less people own more and more houses, and then they decide of the fate of millions of households that can't access a home. And we're pushing for a transparency register on who owns what, because when you look at everything, actually, it's the same with the forests in the EU. When you look at it, really a fewer number of people. So I don't have the exact numbers in my head, also because we don't know them, because we don't have the transparency. But it's huge. It's really 3% of the population, at least in France, owning more than half of the housing, or the numbers are not correct, but it's really to this amount, and this is really problematic.
We had this Jeff Bezos wedding in Venice recently. I don't know if you saw this action. Someone put up a big poster, I think it was Greenpeace, of if you can rent Venice, you can pay more tax. Bit of a provocative question, but do you think billionaires should exist in general? Should the EU allow billionaires?
Well, as I said, it's okay if everyone is billionaire. Then, you know, we can have another discussion. But the issue is really about inequalities and injustices. I can talk about another CEO than Jeff Bezos, which is a French one, so with less money, I have to say. But still, his salary is 5.5 million euros. He was the CEO of a car-making industry, which is just now left to go to a luxury industry. So I guess it's to get more money. But 5.5 million a year he was making. And when a few weeks ago someone asked him, "But do you think you deserve it?" Do you know what he answered? He said, "But you know, I'm working 60, 70 hours a week. I don't sleep at night because I think of my job all the time." And you're like, come on. Think of all the farmers that are working at least this amount of hours that can't sleep either, but also because they need to care for their cattle and they don't even make it to break a salary to pay a rent or whatever. Think about the mothers that, you know, work double shift at work and at home, or all those people who are doing the 3-8, as we say in French, like working all the time. I mean, this is absolutely unfair. It's not based on what you deserve. It's not based on how hardworking you are. And this is what's really unacceptable.
I think the level of inequality is a threat to our society, and this is why I think, I mean, not personally, but like politically, I don't think we need billionaires. And if you see that, like, the level of inequality in the past years had grown and grown with, I think, the top 1%, the richest 1% owning in a country like Germany 40% of the wealth, and you can see that the poorest half of society are just owning like 2% of the wealth, then there is a problem here, and this means that, like, for public policy and needed investments, we don't have enough money to spend them on important projects. And on the other side, as I said before, we can see that, like, this level of inequality also is giving frustrations to many people in society, meaning that they think that democracy is not working any longer because it's just working for some few people. And in this sense, I think we don't need billionaires, and we need to work on that. Like, the level of inequality, like, is much less than it is now.
We're doing quite well on our unicorn tax situation, so well done for keeping it simple.
No, I can talk about the comitology-driven.
You want to pay more tax. That's okay, we're going to move on to the next section, which is a quick fire round, some personal questions. I have a few. So, Rasmus, what was your first job, and was it paid well?
I was working in a kind of a supermarket I'm coming from the German-Danish border region, and we have a lot of Danes going to Germany because it's much cheaper to buy alcohol, for example, in Germany. And I worked in one of the supermarkets at the border where a lot of Danes are coming and are like buying their beer and other stuff. It was paid well in a German context because we got like a little bit of a Danish salary. I think in a Danish context, the salary was not really high, but like in a German context, for a young student like me, it was quite okay.
So you were on the shopping till doing the checkout, basically.
Yeah.
For shopping.
Yeah.
Okay. Marie, if the American dream is becoming...
You don't want me to tell you about
absolutely. You want to tell me your first job, yeah?
No, but it wasn't really my first because I took care of like kids in camps and so on. But there's one job I'd like to share with you guys because I had, and please, the people who love animal, don't be angry at me, but I had to work selling hot dogs in Canada. I was doing some studies over there and I needed to pay for my studies. So I was selling hot dogs for $4 Canadian an hour. Which Canadian, is really not a lot. And it was me and the rest of the people who accepted this kind of salary were whether migrants or people with disabilities. So it was just me and them. Well, we could watch hockey games, which was the, surplus. But so now you can go.
Okay. The next question is, if the American dream is becoming a billionaire, what is the European dream?
Well, I guess I think we've addressed it a bit, but just to say, okay, a society which doesn't have so many inequalities, which means as well that basic fundamental rights are respected, that, you know, the families, when they go to the shops, they are able in real life to buy enough food and good food for their kids, that when they want to, I don't know, buy laundry, how do you call that, machine à lessive, to wash your clothes, you don't have to go at the bottom with the big box where you know there's a lot of chemicals into it that will be bad for your kids, but you can go upper in the shelves and take something good, that you come home and you still have a home because you were able to pay your bills. I think this is all these kind of things is what is really missing. I mean, we're up to 100 million people in the European Union, so 1 out of 4 persons being whether already in situation of poverty or at risk of poverty, and this is absolutely unacceptable. So I think what I would like the European dream to be is really for everyone to be able to live with dignity, and I think this is really what's important here.
Okay. Rasmus, we had a study a few years ago on what a wealth tax would look like across Europe. Spain has introduced a excessive wealth tax for millionaires. Question to you, how many nurses could we fund if the tax was applied for all of Europe?
Well, actually, I can't tell you, but this is. But what I think is the main point laying beyond the question is, and this would also have been my answer to the question you asked to Marie, is that the EU is and should be a continent where we have the possibility with social security to organize life in a way that everybody can participate, and that we have the possibility also to ensure that healthcare is accessible to everyone, no matter if you're like a billionaire or you live an ordinary life in one of the countries within the EU. And for this, for example, investments in healthcare are key. And then I guess you can tell me more about how many nurses we are able to invest in if the wealth tax we would like to see would pass for all parts of Europe.
7.3 million nurses apparently.
Yeah,
if it was
that's quite a lot.
Yes. Okay, Marie, last.
Do we have to
just
pay
need
when
to
we
find
don't know
the people.
how to answer the questions?
I mean, that wouldn't be a very fair tax system, I guess. But okay, last
Good
question on the
point.
quick fire. Would you rather tax private jets or luxury yachts?
That's an
both.
interesting question.
Both.
Is that the right answer?
I guess.
No, because both are really, really polluting, and both are owned by very, very few people. But
You've never flown into Davos in a private jet?
To be really honest, sometimes I wish I had a jet because we have to travel so much as MEP, you know that. But I won't because I'm CO2 conscious, right? Climate conscious.
Yes.
The bell can ring at CO2 conscious, I think. Not because I'm conscious of climate, but also because I don't have the money,
You
and I
want
will
to pay
never
more
have the money.
taxes, it seems.
Maybe.
But if you did have a jet, what would you name it?
Huh.
If you had your own private jet?
I want to stay polite, so I won't answer anything.
Okay, we're going to move on. We have two statements to debunk that your team gave us in advance. So it's one for Marie to ask Rasmus and one for Rasmus to ask Marie. So maybe Marie, I think
I can begin.
You can start.
Dear Rasmus, you want to tax the rich, but lowering taxes for rich people is good for the economy, you know? They get to spend more, it will lead to more jobs, so we shouldn't be taxing rich people, should we?
That's what I think is one of the arguments I hear the most when like people are trying to oppose to tax the rich. I mean, taxing the rich doesn't mean they don't have any money left, but they will they need to give a little bit more of their wealth, like in taxes, to the state. And we can see that the opposite actually is true of this myth, because like if you see on like for example the US, where there had been some big tax cuts, so even you gave the possibility to very rich people to spend less money on taxes, that they didn't spend the money on a lot of good things, on well-paid jobs and so on, but they used the money just to spend them on their own behalf, for example by buying things like luxury goods, where we can see that like this doesn't really have a big effect on our economy. So I think that this is like one of the myths where we can see that yeah, things are not working out like that, and it's one of the very weak arguments, I think.
But a persistent one that keeps on returning.
Because I mean, like it sounds good, right? And the same is true like if you're not talking about individuals, but if you're talking about corporations, giving tax cuts to big companies means they can invest much more, and this is good for our economy, blah blah blah. This we hear all of the time, but on all of the examples we could see, there had been a big tax reform like 20 years ago in Germany, for example. You could see that this is not true, because the companies are not spending the money in a way which is good for the workers or for society in general. And there had been recent studies on this to explain that this argument is not right.
They don't invest. They actually buy back their dividends, so that they develop strategies to get more money into their pockets, to make the actions go higher. So they play in the financial market, but they don't invest it. And they sometimes even go and dig into their treasury to be able to buy shares, and absolutely not to invest, which we absolutely need.
Okay, Rasmus, your statement to debunk, for Marie to debunk.
Yes. Marie, millionaires and billionaires have worked really hard for their money, and anyone can become rich as them if they just work hard enough, so that like everybody actually can become a billionaire or a millionaire. So what's the problem by becoming rich? And is this not just like a fair system where like, yeah, the American dream maybe also can come true for a lot of Europeans? What are you
But Rasmus, you really need to get out of this European institution. It's really preventing you from seeing what's happening in the real world, you know? Because, well, firstly, you can see perfectly that a lot of workers are working a lot. They're working like hell, and they barely make it. So becoming billionaire is even worse. Secondly, we have a rate of, you know, transmission, generation per generation.
Oh, you were taxed.
Yeah, but for what reason?
when you don't, you need to get out of the institution.
You give it to your kids, and then you give it to their kids. And I don't want to be buzzed right now. No, but I mean, the generations, like families, they stay rich or they stay poor. You know, there is not so much mobility. That's what we can see. And it's true in the EU, and it's true in the US as well, despite the famous American dream. And if we look at what's happening, just to give one number, please don't buzz me, but Oxfam's 2024 report shows that the 5 richest men have more than doubled their wealth since 2020, while nearly 5 billion people became poorer. So I think 5 billion, it's not talking to a lot of people, but we're 7 billion in this planet. So that means that a lot of people just went really poor, while just a few are becoming richer. And I also want to say that among the billionaires, we count 9 men out of 10 persons, which also means that, I'm sorry, Rasmus, if you believe that really women are really, you know, not suited to work, but that also means that, you know, there's an inequality that is really visible and very obvious, and that actually is just the illustration of all the nasty system that we're living in.
Yeah, no, I mean, I fully agree, and I think that like looking into the figures, for example, you can see that in a country like Germany, the country I at least know best, like close to 60% of the wealth people got was because of heritage and gifts, meaning they didn't even had a good business case or a strong idea. So it just like really something where you can see that it's because of the parents and the family and friends they are creating this wealth, and this even says a lot about that, like this argument this myth is a bit stupid and it's not really saying a lot about like how reality looks like.
Okay, good debunking. I'm conscious of time because I believe Marie has to go and vote in committee very, very briefly, but we'll just finish on the very last segment, which is solutions. Can we fix things coming up? Are there any big solutions out there on tax? I know there's this idea floating of an international wealth tax for billionaires. What are the kind of upcoming big thoughts out there on tax at the moment?
Well, what do you think, Simon?
Well, I'm just the interviewer. I couldn't possibly give my opinion. But maybe we start with you, Marie, because you'll have to run away pretty soon.
No, there are a lot of solutions. I mean, we already discussed taxing the wealthiest people, and Gabriel Zuckman has put on the table a proposal that is quite interesting. And as you mentioned, actually, we, as the Green Groups, also ordered a study to see how. So we have different ways of taxing wealth, which would represent a really small amount for them, but a huge contribution to society. We have tax on financial movements, for instance. France has begun to pull some things, and some other member states, and they're discussing, but it's not moving. And one of the big issues is that the money jumps from one, payroll to another, and it never reaches the real world. So this is one of the issues that we're going to really try to fix. You talked about private jets and private yachts, so that could be another issue. And since I have anyhow to go to vote and try to prevent the EPP and the far right to kill anything about forests and so on, I will leave you guys and Rasmus complete what I did.
Great. Thank you, Marie, for joining.
Have a nice end of podcast.
Have a nice vote.
So, Rasmus, while Marie is exiting the stage left, any other big ideas out there that you're working on, or that the European Parliament is working on at the moment?
I think we should start by taxing Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg and all the other tech oligarchs from the US, where we know that we are in a tough battle right now, not just about trade and economy, but about our democracy and about who has the power, political power, but also economic power. And I think one part of it is to tax the big tech companies much more than we are doing right now. And I know that like this is something as Greens we had called for a long time, but also the European Commission is discussing this like much more intense than like they did in the past. And I think that we could do a first step, for example, by taxing them. And the second one is on transparency. Marie mentioned this a bit earlier in our conversation. We can just like tax wealth if we have all the informations ready. So a transparency register where we really can see who owns what in Europe, but also Europeans in other parts of the world would be the first step to ensure that we can then afterwards come up with solutions like a wealth tax more in general. So I think both on the tech companies and on the wealth register, it's quite easy to do, but we need the majorities, and we can see that the Commission is discussing, but especially in the Parliament, looking to the Conservatives, looking to the Liberals, we can see that they are quite reluctant in doing so, and this is one of our challenges we also are facing here in the House to ensure that majorities are shifting, and maybe we will also have some Conservatives at the end voting in favor of proposals like that.
Yeah. Rasmus and an absent Marie, thank you both for joining, and the fight continues on tax. That's all for us for now. If you'd like to hear more conversations from us, you can find out how to subscribe on greens.eu/podcast. This podcast has been a production by the Green EFA Group in the European Parliament with help from our editorial team, Katie, Alexiane, Rita, Lena and Jeroen. Technical support was done by Andrea and Agnes. Thanks a lot and see you next time.